Joran walked slowly through the narrow paths of the alien black market. The air smelled of smoke and oil. Strange lights blinked above his head. Creatures from across the galaxy whispered and argued, trading goods in low voices. He was not here for trouble. He only needed a part to fix his old ship. But something pulled him deeper into the darker side of the market. He passed by cages, metal cages where weak creatures sat silently. Some were too thin, their bones showing under their skin. Some were too tired to look up. He hated this part of the galaxy. He hated how cheap life had become here. But then, he heard something soft. A voice, barely a whisper. He turned. Behind, one of the cages sat a tiny alien girl. Her skin was pale lavender, her white hair tied in messy knots. Her big eyes were glowing faint blue but dull with sadness. She looked no older than 8 human years. Her knees were pulled to her chest, and she held her arms tight around them. Joran knelt beside the cage. "Hey," he said gently. "Are you all right?" She didn't answer. He looked at the merchant sitting nearby, chewing something red. "What's her story?" The merchant shrugged. "Found her in a wrecked pod near Sector 12. She don't talk, might be broken. You want her? I'll give her for cheap." "Cheap?" Joran said, frowning. "She's not cargo. Everything has a price here, friend, even silence." Joran looked back at the girl. Something about her face made his chest ache. Maybe it was her eyes. Maybe it was the way she looked like she had given up. "Do you have a name?" he asked her quietly. Still no answer. He was about to stand and walk away. He didn't need this, he couldn't take care of anyone, he was barely surviving himself. But just as he turned, a soft voice reached his ear. "I was once a princess." He froze. Slowly, he turned back. She hadn't moved. Her lips were barely open, but her voice was clear. I was once a princess." Joran's heart skipped. Was it true? Or was she just dreaming? He had heard of royal families being overthrown in alien worlds, children taken, sold, forgotten. But a princess? Here? In this place? "What did you say?" he asked carefully. She didn't repeat herself. Her eyes stared forward, empty and lost. Joran felt something heavy in his chest. She wasn't lying, or at least she believed what she said. He took a deep breath and stood. "How much?" he asked the merchant. The man laughed. "You serious? 10 credits. Joran reached into his jacket and pulled out all he had. 7 credits and 2 small ration coins. "Take it or leave it." The merchant spit to the side. "Deal." The cage door creaked open. The girl didn't move. Joran bent down and offered his hand. "Come on, you're free now." She looked at his hand for a long moment. Then slowly she placed her small, cold hand in his. She stood up, legs shaking. He wrapped his jacket around her thin shoulders and guided her out of the market. Many eyes watched them, some with confusion, some with pity, some with hunger. But Joran didn't stop. As they reached his ship, the girl walked slower and slower. She looked back once, then forward again. Inside, Joran sat her down on a small bed. He gave her a cup of warm liquid. She held it but didn't drink. He didn't push her. He simply sat nearby and waited. After a while, she whispered, "My name is Liari." "That's a beautiful name," Joran replied. She looked up at him, her voice soft. "Are you going to sell me again?" His jaw tightened. "Never." She stared at him for a few more seconds, then looked away. A small tear ran down her cheek. She wiped it quickly like she wasn't allowed to cry. That night, Joran sat by the engine room, staring at his ship's damage. He had no money left, no plan. But somehow this little girl was now his responsibility. She claimed to be a princess. Maybe it was true, maybe not. But one thing was clear. She was no ordinary child. And somewhere out there, someone might be looking for her, or worse, someone might be hunting her. The girl who won't sleep, Liari, sat on the edge of the small bed in Joran's ship, her legs swinging slightly but never touching the floor. She still hadn't taken off the old dirty rags she wore from the market. Even with a warm blanket around her shoulders and food beside her, she didn't relax. Her eyes kept scanning the corners of the room, as if she expected someone to come in and hurt her at any moment. Joran tried to fix the broken control panel, but he kept glancing back at her. She hadn't said a word since she told him her name. She hadn't touched the food or the drink. And she hadn't asked where they were going, like she didn't care, like she had stopped hoping. "Liari," he said softly, "you're safe here. You don't need to be afraid anymore." She looked at him with those same glowing blue eyes, then quickly looked away. "Everyone says that," she whispered. Joran didn't know what to say. He wasn't good at comforting people. He was just a mechanic, not a hero. But this girl made him want to protect her. Maybe it was her voice. Maybe it was the sadness in her small hands. Or maybe it was the way she said she used to be a princess, like even she had trouble believing it now. That night, after checking the ship's course, Joran walked to the sleeping chamber. The ship was quiet, but then he heard it, soft humming. A strange song, low and full of sorrow. The voice was gentle, almost like a lullaby from another world. He followed the sound to Liari's room. She was sitting cross-legged on the bed, her eyes closed, humming an old tune. Her hands were folded on her lap. She didn't know he was there. The song didn't sound like something a slave would sing. It had beauty and rhythm. It had memory, like something passed down through royal generations. She stopped suddenly and opened her eyes. "You heard me?" she asked, surprised. "I did," Joran said. "It was beautiful." She looked down. "It's a royal cradle song. My mother used to sing it. Before the fire." Joran's heart ached. "The fire?" She nodded. "When the palace burned. When they came for us." There was silence between them, a heavy silence filled with pain and fear. Joran sat on the floor beside the bed. "Liari, who is they?" She didn't answer. "Liari, I don't know who gave the order," she whispered, "but my mother screamed for me to run. I ran through the gardens. I remember the sky was red. Then someone hit me. I woke up in a cage." Joran clenched his fists. He could feel anger boiling inside him, not just for what she suffered, but because no one had helped her. No one had searched for her. A child, maybe a royal child, thrown into darkness and sold like an object. "You remember your home?" "Only some parts," she said quietly. The floor was gold, and the guards wore blue armor. There were lights in the ceiling that looked like stars, and my mother had long silver hair like a waterfall. Her voice cracked as she said it. Joran nodded slowly. "I believe you." She looked at him with wide eyes. "You do?" "Yeah, and I think someone else might believe you too. Maybe someone still remembers the girl with silver-haired mother." She didn't speak for a long moment. Then softly she asked, "Why did you take me?" He thought for a while. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I went to buy a part for my ship, but I heard you crying. I couldn't walk away." She stared at him like she was trying to read something inside his heart. Then she whispered, "Thank you." Joran gave a small nod and stood. "Get some rest, all right?" She nodded. But later that night, as Joran walked by her room again, he saw her still sitting there, eyes wide open. She wasn't sleeping. She hadn't even moved. She was scared to close her eyes. That's when he knew. Whatever happened to her wasn't just a sad story. It was something deep, something dangerous, something still following her. And maybe now, it was following him too. Escape from the bounty hunters. The ship shook, hard. Joran dropped his cup of water as red warning lights flashed across the control panel. Sirens screamed through the small vessel. From the hallway he heard a terrified cry. "Liari!" He rushed to the passenger quarters, but the girl was already curled in a corner, clutching a pillow to her chest. Her eyes were wide with fear. She wasn't crying. She was frozen, like this had happened before. Stay here, he told her quickly, running back to the cockpit. Outside the window, two black ships were closing in fast. Their hulls were smooth, no markings. Bounty hunters. Joran's hands moved fast over the controls, trying to fire up the defense system. But these hunters were professionals. They'd already jammed his nav link. This isn't a random attack, he muttered to himself. A voice cracked over the comm. It was deep and cold. You have something that belongs to House Cervec. Hand over the girl. We will spare your life. Joran stared at the speaker. House Cervec? He hadn't heard that name in years, but it was once tied to a noble bloodline known across several systems. If these people were after Liari, it meant her story was real. She really was a princess. Not happening. Joran growled into the mic. He slammed the comm off and powered the hidden turret under the hull. His old ship wasn't fast, but it had bite. The left turret opened fire. Bright blue pulses shot through the dark space, hitting one of the hunter ships. It spun out of the way, but Joran had bought himself a few seconds. He bolted to the hallway. Liari hadn't moved. She looked pale, shaking, her mouth barely forming words. I know those ships, she whispered. Those are the guards. The ones who served my uncle. Your uncle? Joran asked, heart pounding. He told me I was sick, that I had to go away for a while. Then I woke up in a cage. Joran didn't wait for more. He pulled her to her feet gently. We're getting out of here. He dragged a hidden panel off the wall and opened a crawl space. Go in. Stay quiet. Liari nodded and crawled inside. He shut it behind her and ran back to the controls. The second bounty ship fired a stun blast. The ship jolted. Sparks flew from the control panel. Joran bit down a curse and rerouted power to the forward thrusters. As he turned the ship, the bounty hunters closed in. But Joran had one more surprise. He activated the ejector module, blasting out hundreds of metal scraps behind him. The hunter's sensors were blinded. He pulled hard on the thrusters and dived into a nearby asteroid field. Rocks spun everywhere. One false move and they'd be torn apart. But Joran had flown worse. Behind him, the bounty ships chased. But one clipped an asteroid and exploded. The shockwave sent the other one tumbling off course. Joran let out a deep breath as the alarms died. They were safe, for now. He opened the crawl space. Liari crawled out, her face pale. I heard the explosions. They're gone, Joran said, kneeling in front of her. But you were right. They weren't strangers. They knew you. She looked down. They served my family. But now, they want me dead. Joran placed a hand on her shoulder. Why would your own family do that? She whispered. Because I'm the true heir, and they're afraid I'll return. The room fell silent. Joran had just become part of something far bigger than he had ever imagined. This wasn't about kindness anymore. This was about royal blood, betrayal, and power. And now, every hunter in the galaxy might be after his ship, because of the girl who once called herself a princess. A princess's memory returns. The ship floated in quiet space, far from any known trade route. Stars blinked outside like watching. Eyes but inside the small vessel, time had slowed. Joran sat at the table holding a thin silver band in his fingers. It wasn't large, just a child's circlet, dull from age, bent at the side. He had found it hidden deep in the girl's old bag, wrapped in layers of torn cloth. He thought it was just junk, until he saw the mark. A royal seal, a real one. He carried it to her room and knocked softly. Liari? She sat cross-legged, on the bed, her eyes heavy from lack of sleep. Yes? I found this, he said, holding out the circlet. The moment she saw it, something inside her shifted. Her eyes widened. Her small hands trembled as she reached for it. She touched the seal with her fingertips, tracing the worn symbol like a forgotten dream. I know this, she breathed. This was mine. Her voice broke. They said I was imagining it, that there was no palace, no family, that I was just Some lost child. She held the circlet to her chest, eyes full of tears, but then slowly she began to speak. I remember the throne room. It was tall, with windows reaching the sky. The floor was smooth like water. My mother wore a crown, like fire. I used to sit on her lap during council meetings. They laughed at how small I was. Joran sat down across from her, silent. And there was a songbird, she continued. It lived in a golden cage above the great doors. I used to feed it dried fruits. I named it Meili. Her voice grew stronger with each word, like the memories were pouring back in. The night everything changed, there was music in the air, a celebration. I wore a red dress. My mother kissed my forehead and said I looked just like her. Then there was shouting, guards dragging people away, flames on the balconies. My uncle was there, smiling. And I remember my mother telling me to hide. Joran could see it now. Not just a scared alien girl, but a royal child, a survivor of betrayal and fire. He reached out slowly. You don't have to remember it all now, just what you can. Liari nodded. Her fingers still clutched the circlet. If they knew I was alive, they'd want me gone forever. Joran leaned back. Then it's time we stop hiding. She blinked. What? You said you're the true heir. Then we go back. We find proof. You tell your story to the people who need to hear it. Liari's eyes filled with fear. It's not that easy. The palace is guarded. My uncle still rules. I'm just a girl. No one will believe me. They will, Joran said firmly. If they see your face, if they hear the truth from your lips. And I'll help you. I won't leave you behind. For the first time, Liari didn't look down. She looked straight at him, not like a broken child, but like someone who had once commanded a kingdom. Then take me home, she whispered. Even if it kills me. Joran smiled sadly. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. But deep inside he knew, whatever awaited them at the royal citadel wasn't just danger. It was war, the kind that starts not with soldiers, but with the return of a child who was never supposed to survive, a child who once wore a crown, and who now remembered everything, infiltrating the royal citadel. The sky over Rizar Prime burned gold as Joran's ship slipped silently through the cloud cover. Below them stood the royal citadel, an ancient fortress built on crystal cliffs, its silver towers rising like swords. It had once been a place of music and light. Now it pulsed with armed patrols, surveillance drones, and banners bearing the face of a false king. Inside the ship, Liari stood before the mirror, dressed in a long gray cloak. Her pale hair was brushed neatly for the first time in years. The silver circlet rested just behind her ears. It didn't shine like it used to, but it was hers. And she was ready. I don't know if I can do this, she whispered. Joran turned from the controls and looked at her. You're not going in there as a slave. You're going in as a memory the galaxy tried to erase. That alone makes you powerful. She nodded slowly, but her hands were trembling. They landed behind the ruins of an old supply post, just outside the citadel wall. Liari knew the layout well. The garden tunnels that fed water through the city also served as emergency escape routes. She had used one to flee the night the fire began. Together, they slipped inside the underground path. The tunnel was damp and cold. Moss had grown along the walls. Rats, alien ones with too many eyes, scurried past them. But Liari kept moving. Her steps were quiet but sure. Up ahead, she said softly. The servant corridor. They climbed an iron ladder that led to a small opening behind the royal kitchens. Voices echoed nearby. Laughter, guards telling jokes. No one noticed the two shadows creeping through the hall. As they moved deeper into the heart of the palace, Joran saw her start to change. Her posture straightened. Her eyes scanned like she was counting steps, like her body still remembered this place. And then they reached it, the royal chamber. Liari stared at the doors. They were tall and black now, painted over with her uncle's crest. Her hands clenched. "This used to be my mother's throne room." Joran opened the side panel with a tool and deactivated the lock. The door clicked open. Inside was darkness. But on the far wall, carved in stone, was the old royal symbol, the original crest. It had been scratched, partly destroyed, but still visible. Liari stepped forward. Her fingers brushed the stone. "He tried to erase us," she whispered. But the stone remembers. In a small storage room nearby, they found what Joran had hoped for: files, recordings, documents sealed away in hidden drawers. He grabbed as much as he could: holodisks, birth records, decrees signed by the former queen, all bearing Liari's full name. Just as they were about to leave, the alarm sounded. Too late. The corridor flooded with guards. Joran raised his hands. Liari stood frozen beside him. Then one of the older guards stepped forward. He looked at the girl. His face paled. "By the stars, and it can't be." Liari took a slow breath. Her voice shook, but she stood tall. "It is. I am Princess Liari of House Elira, and I have come home." The guards hesitated. Some raised weapons. Others looked uncertain. Joran moved in front of her. "We're not here to fight." But he knew this was the turning point. One whisper had already begun to spread in the palace hallways. The rightful heir had returned, and now no secret tunnel could hide her. Not anymore. The rise of the forgotten heir. The palace air was thick with silence. No one moved. The guards stared at the girl standing before them, tiny, pale, and quiet, but holding herself like someone carved from royal stone. Liari didn't flinch. She didn't beg. She simply stood tall, her chin lifted, her silver circlet catching the faint light from the hall. The older guard who had first spoken dropped to one knee. "Forgive me, Princess, I failed you once, I won't fail again." Gasps echoed through the corridor. Another guard lowered his weapon, then another, then a third. One by one they stepped back, not just from fear, but from memory. They remembered her. The child who once danced in the throne room. The girl who fed the golden songbird. The lost royal who had vanished the night the sky turned red. Liari's voice was calm. "My uncle stole my name, my home, my mother's crown. I've returned not for revenge, but for truth." Joran stepped beside her, watching the guards with cautious eyes. He held the holodisc filled with proof: her birth record, her mother's last message, the line of royal blood. But the truth had already reached them through something stronger than data. It had reached them through her presence. A young maid appeared behind the guards, gasping when she saw Liari. "Princess," she whispered. "You're alive?" Liari turned slowly. "You braided my hair the night of the festival." The maid nodded, tears welling. "I sang to you while your mother dressed you in red." That was all it took. The whisper spread through the palace halls like fire. "She's back." Within hours, the citadel was a storm. Servants ran to deliver news to other sectors. Loyalists came out of hiding. Former council members demanded to see the girl. Her uncle, the false king, locked himself in the upper tower, his face pale with fear as he stared at the old royal seal. Joran walked beside Liari as they moved toward the throne room. This time, not through tunnels, but through the front doors. Crowds lined the great hall. They watched her every step. And not one person laughed. Not one called her a liar. Some bowed. Others dropped to their knees. Old faces, once servants, once guards, once friends, now wept at the sight of her. She stopped at the foot of the throne. It was empty, but the crown sat above it on a velvet pillow. Her fingers touched the edge, but she didn't lift it. "I don't want power," she said, her voice steady. "I want peace, justice, and an end to the lies." Then she looked to the people. "You can crown me if you wish, but only if you believe that truth matters more than fear, that love matters more than control." A silence followed. A heavy one. Then one voice spoke from the back, an elder, shaking but proud. Long live the true heir. Long live Princess Liari. The hall erupted in cries of loyalty. She did not smile. She stood quietly as they placed the crown upon her head, not with joy, but with purpose. The people cheered, but her eyes found Joran standing in the crowd. She gave him the smallest nod. He had not just saved her. He had helped her remember who she was. Now she stood not as a rescued girl, but as a symbol. The forgotten had returned, and the throne would never again be ruled by fear. A new beginning. The sun rose over Rizar Prime for the first time in years without fear hanging in the sky. The royal banners of the false king were torn down. In their place, the crest of House Elira, Likari's true family, flew high over the silver towers. People gathered in the palace square not to protest or beg, but to witness history. Joran stood at the edge of the crowd, arms crossed, still not used to all the ceremony. He'd spent most of his life in the shadows, repairing broken ships, flying through forgotten systems. Now he had helped bring down a king, and the girl he had pulled out of a cage was now a queen. Liari stepped onto the grand balcony, the silver crown resting lightly on her head. She wore white and gold, her pale hair flowing freely in the morning wind. She didn't wave. She didn't shout. She simply stood tall and quiet, letting the people see her. And they did. With awe, with love, with hope. Her voice echoed through the crystal towers. You don't owe me loyalty because of my blood. You owe it to yourselves to live in truth, not in fear. To raise your children in peace, not lies. I was a child sold in chains. Forgotten, lost, and yet, one man stopped to listen. Her eyes searched the crowd. They found Joran. She smiled, gently. He didn't know I was a princess. He just knew I was hurting, and that was enough. The people turned to look at Joran, who now felt very uncomfortable. A few clapped, then more, and then the entire square roared with applause, not just for the queen, but for the man who chose compassion over coin. Later, in the quiet garden of the palace, Liari met Joran under the old songbird tree, new life already growing in its branches. She looked younger here without the crown, her feet bare in the grass. You never asked for anything, she said softly. I didn't need to, Joran replied. You weren't something to be paid for. You were someone to be saved. She sat beside him on the stone bench. I want to rebuild this world, not just the palace. The systems that let children like me be sold, the silence that follows broken voices. You'll need help. She looked at him with a small smile. Stay. Joran raised an eyebrow. Stay? In a palace? You were there when I had no voice. I want you beside me now that I can speak for others. He paused, then nodded. All right, but don't expect me to wear robes. She laughed for the first time in days, a sound clear and light like a chime in the wind. From the black market to the royal court, from a cage to a crown, her story had shaken the stars. But in the end, it wasn't just about power. It was about a girl who had been lost, and the human who reminded her that she mattered. Together they would change more than a kingdom. They would change the galaxy, one forgotten child at a time.